Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Bulletproof Selling. This is Sean Rhodes, Chief Sales Sergeant at Bulletproof Selling and author of the book Bulletproof Selling, a guide for systemizing sales on the battlefield of business. Here at Bulletproof Selling, our motto, our mantra is that we believe that hope is not a sales strategy, and yet so many people are relying on it. So our mission here is to help increase the performance of salespeople and the results of their sales teams by removing that hope as something that they rely on and replacing it with something else, replacing it with certainty. Now, our weekly Bulletproof Selling series that we have here, we get to interview the top minds in sales, experts, authors, consultants, speakers, trainers, coaches, and people that are actually out there on the front lines building sales teams. And my commitment is that of every one of these shows, we are going to build a sales system with our guests that you can use no matter the size of your team or the size of your goals. Now, I'm very excited to be introducing Mr. Nick Sheehan onto the show today. Nick, welcome to Bulletproof Selling, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Now, like a lot of people that have been on the show recently, you're coming out of the franchise world. Y'all are just kind of dropping into my lap recently, which I love because franchise folks think systemically about how they approach a business. And means they think systems in how they approach sales. But you're in kind of an interesting situation, Nick, as I understand that you not only worked franchise business, grown franchises, but now you have a company that helps franchise owners become more successful. So I think we're going to have like a systems conversation at the next level here. But for the folks that haven't gotten to read your bio, tell us about yourself and how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah, thanks, for sure. So I kicked off franchising. First off, I like to say I'm just all franchising. I've done nothing but franchising in my career. So, and like most people that wind up getting in this industry that I'm associated with, we all kind of fall into it by accident. And my accident falling into franchising was really in college. I was actually getting my MBA. I met a mentor early on, guy in his 70s, had 12 different businesses he owned, was super successful. And he was a teacher. And really just took a liking to me because I had out of all things, a car washing and a boat washing business in college.
Huh.
And he just liked that I was out there hustling. So started meeting with him for lunch week by week. And then I was like 22 at the time. And he said, hey, I get a lot of businesses that are thrown in my lap often that people want help with me, getting them to grow their business, whatever. And he said, I'll throw you some case studies. If there's one that's interested, maybe we run with it. And the one that fell into his lap and we started to run with was an ink and toner recycling business. This was back in 04 and 05 before iPads and people printed more. And I started selling toner door to door.
Nice.
And no better way to learn how to do anything than knocking on doors, I'll tell you, especially in Florida in the summer. So I did that, and we actually grew it to a $500,000 a year business, and over I'll say the next 12 months. And then he had some franchising experience, and one of his brands was called Rent-A-Wreck Car Rental, and they turned that around 500 plus locations nationwide. And basically, we started this business, and long story short, we wound up expanding it up in the Baltimore market. And then a year later, we franchised it. So fast forward 6 years into it, we had 35 locations and everything from selling the franchises to training them. It was crash course into franchising and starting a business from scratch. So that was kind of my initial way into franchising. And then sold that business. I moved back. I'm from New York. I moved back to Connecticut. I consulted with a company in Connecticut for about 14 months. Essentially helped individuals looking to buy franchises and helped emerging franchisors who are looking to go to market. And I met a company through that experience called St. Gregory Development Group. And at the time, St. Gregory was just about 2 years old. And they were a franchise development firm, which is the first time I had really heard of that. And what they did is they take emerging concepts and they say, hey, you have 5 or 10 units today. And if you want to grow to several hundred, we have that recipe to help you get there if you have the right. And the first brand that they worked on is called Title Boxing Club. And when I came on board, they had taken that from 5 units to 500 in just over 2 years. And then they were also starting their own concept because they had been involved in beauty, health and wellness, and fitness. And they started a brand called CycleBar. So that's where I dug deep into franchising because I came on before it was franchised, started to franchise the concept, fast forward, 2 years later, we had 100 open and another 250 in development. And we were purchased by private equity. At the same time, I decided to invest in CycleBar with a partner. And we opened our very first location of our own in Hoboken, New Jersey, about 4.5 years ago and today. So,
wow.
And today I sit at 15 CycleBars. We're the largest franchisee of CycleBar. So I've been on both sides of the fence. And if you kind of look at the last few years at St. Gregory, I was there all the way through 2019. I was chief development officer there. And we actually got bought out by not only TPG, but TPG was then bought out by a gentleman named Anthony Geisler, who is the CEO and founder of Exponential Fitness. And they basically had started Club Pilates or taken it over at a very small level, had grown that and said, hey, I want to buy CycleBar as the first acquisition, and now created what is now Exponential Fitness with 9 different boutique fitness brands under one umbrella. And that's our parent company as a franchisee of CycleBar today. And I couldn't be more excited to be a part of that. They just went public 2 months ago.
Oh, wow. Congrats.
Yeah. So that was pretty interesting. And at the end of 2019, they decided to dissolve the St. Gregory Development Group because they wanted to go public. They basically brought most of the St. Gregory folks in-house to Exponential. And I just opted to not do that and wanted to continue to do things as an entrepreneur. And, just in being in the franchising community, have a lot of people I respect and would love to do business with. And timing was right for a gentleman named Rob Cambruzzi and I to get together. I've known Rob for a long time. I met him when he was at Driven Brands, which is owned by a big conglomerate called Rourke Capital. And we joined forces with another gentleman named Jason Ryan and formed the Repum Group for what it is today at the beginning of 2020. And so we are the co-founders of it, and we've got a lot of activity in the last, call it 21, 22 months now, that's taken us to where we are today, and kind of what we formed and why we formed it, I can go over, but that's essentially my background in a nutshell.
So I love it. Door to door to managing over a dozen locations of your own business. That's quite an accomplishment. Now, tell me a little bit about what Repum Group does, because this is something that I'm interested. Do you help franchisors and franchisees get together, hook them up? Do you help franchisors efficiently operate their businesses? Tell me a little bit about what that value proposition is.
Yeah. So the value proposition is, in my tenure in franchising, the one thing I've learned over the time is that emerging franchisors, and typically when I say emerging franchisors, it's traditionally brands that have 50 or less units open. But typically it's really 20 or less. The ones that we focus on typically have that 5 to 10 open units, maybe 15. Oftentimes, maybe there's a few franchise locations, more corporate than franchised, and they have a really successful, interesting proposition to franchise. And what I found is there's no clear roadmap to franchising. It's not like if a company wants to go public, for example, there's a clear roadmap on how you get there, right?
Right.
It's all given to you. Whereas if you want to go to 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 units of franchising, there's really no clear roadmap on how you get there. And there's a lot of people out there that can give you advice. And what I've learned is most of them don't know that much about franchising, or if they do, they don't know enough about how to really get you where you want to go. So in the premise of what Repum and why it was created was we wanted to create a full source franchise development firm that ultimately would allow emerging brands that have that 5 to call it 20 units open, really have a resource that would be a one-stop shop to get them to really go to market the right way and responsibly. Because the other thing, a lot of people can help you sell franchises, but oftentimes there's not much to back it up, meaning like, hey, they have a good selling proposition, but how are they supporting the franchisee? So what we did is we created 4 different divisions under Repum. So when you think of a really important aspect of franchising and brands is really branding, right? Sure. So branding and marketing. And we created the Brandum division to assist with that. I was fortunate enough to bring in one of my colleagues from St. Gregory, who was he was actually the chief brand officer there at St. Gregory, Harvard grad, had 18 years at Procter & Gamble. And so we go through an exercise that really helps our brands go to market. And it's really all about go-to-market strategy, not only as a franchisor, but what's that go-to-market strategy for the franchisees? How do they go to market? Because oftentimes as well, it's one thing to say, hey, I have 5 corporate locations open and I've done this. But when you franchise it, it's apples and oranges. Supporting the franchisee to get to that same economics that the corporate stores has created, you really need to create a thorough roadmap to get there. Because what I often, the entrepreneur has it in their head, but it's not down on paper. And so if you don't have it thoroughly outlined, it can be problematic for the franchisee, because most franchisees are from corporate America and they're used to following systems, right? Creating systems from scratch. So that's the first division and strategy. And then there is what we call the Grow 'em division, which Grow 'em is the division of which once we have a candidate that's interested in buying a franchise, we have a 6-week sales process to bring that candidate through. And I really refer to it as our education process, not our sales process, because in franchising, we're awarding franchises, not selling franchises. And ultimately, they go through that education to learn if this is a good fit on both sides of the fence. The franchisor thinks you're a good fit, and the franchisee, because it's a marriage at the end of the day with these businesses and franchising. So, and then the third division is called, which was the original brand. My partner, Rob Cambruzzi, founded a company called RPM, which is Real Estate Project Management. And it really assists in helping franchisees open their doors. So from the moment that they sign a franchise agreement, this company would basically help the franchisees secure a site and help them find the right location, and then do construction management. So we relabeled that Build 'em as our third division. And when our franchisees and any one of our brands that we partner with sign, they'll use that division to help get them open. And then the final division is called Scale 'em. And Scale 'em really is a big differentiator. I think this is the part that most people don't want to tackle, which is the operational piece of franchising. So our third partner, Jason Ryan, was actually the president of Mako, and he was with Driven Brands for 15 years. That's a 600 unit chain, $600 million a year business. And he really came up in the ranks from starting with the founder that started. They had Mako, Meineke, Goddard Schools. They have some big brands. And then 3 or 4 transactions later from private equity, decided that was enough for him and wanted to move on to something different. So we were fortunate enough to bring him in as a partner. And really the whole thing is we have another gal, Rebecca Horowitz, who worked with Jason over there as VP of operations, and really put together the sound plan, again, not to just go to market, but what happens after you go to market? What are the daily operations look like? What are the daily things that franchisees may struggle with? And it's really putting together a thorough plan and reverse engineering based on the franchisor's goals. So let's say they want to get to 500 units open in 5 years' time. Okay, what does that mean as you get to 50, 100 licenses? When you have 100 licenses, that's not 100 franchisees. That could be 40 or 50 franchisees.
Right, with multiple locations. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so you brought up a couple of things that I think are going to be applicable to any salesperson watching or listening to this, which is systems. You've talked about creating a business model that's cradle to grave. I mean, from the time that I raise my hand and say, I might be interested in learning about franchises, to you helping me choose the right one, because it is a marriage, I agree, to getting me a location, making sure I can scale. I mean, your company is really providing that end-to-end service with that suite of services. And so how big is the sales team that you're managing now? Are you keeping it small, or do you have a bunch of people working for you?
A bunch. So one of the things I believe in, and my partners would agree if they were on this with me today, is that we believe in investing in people. So we invested in infrastructure, from the support staff to the sales team. So we have a little bit over 30 employees in total right now. And we've got 7 brands that we currently work with. So, and that's dating back to, when we literally struck this whole new Rep 'em brand and created everything, was the 2020 of first week in January of 2020. So great timing with the pandemic about to hit, right?
Yeah.
But so we've grown from that point of view and done pretty well through the pandemic. But about 30 employees.
And so you've led a career where it's door to door, learning sales as you go, having a lot of doors slammed in your face. I'd be willing to put money on,
Yeah.
and then you all the way to now where you're helping these business owners or entrepreneurs pick up a brand, figure out is it the right fit, and then helping them get established to the point where they themselves could open up dozens of locations and have a very profitable business stream of their own. So in all of that, decades of experience. This is a question we ask every guest, and I'm very excited to get your answer. Where do you see salespeople relying on hope a little more than they should? And you can think back to the days when you were trying to figure out as you went door to door, all the way to the people that you get to work with now that think, I might want to be running a business for myself. I know it's going to involve sales. I hope I figure it out as I go. So feel free to, tackle any of that. But where would you really see hope in play a little more than it should be?
Well, funny, one of my original mentors, I used to say, oh, we'll hope to get this, or we'll hope this will happen. He said, hope's not a plan, Nick. That's just a hope and a dream. So let's put together a plan on how you get there. And so I learned over time that that's the most important thing. I think most salespeople do rely on that. And here's what I'd say is probably the most important thing I've learned is I think there's a ton of good salespeople out there that have great potential, but I think systems let them down. And one of the philosophies we have at Replum is, as we grew our system, I consistently would say to my sales team, you know what, you guys are doing a great job, but then we'd break down where whatever decision was not working or what was not working out, where it happened and why. And oftentimes it's the system that's breaking down, not the salesperson. Now, occasionally the salesperson not doing their job, of course, and executing. But I find that the more buttoned up the system is, the more precise it is, the more prescriptive it is, if you will, for the sales team, the less risk you have for it not working. Because if it is working, it'll come out pretty quickly, and it'll come out in the weekly, the monthly reports that whoever is doing their job isn't doing it. And then you can either course correct and that person can get on track, or that person, is exited gracefully out of the system. That's how I like to feel it.
Now, I absolutely love the topic you're addressing now, because here at Bulletproof Selling, we build systems. One topic that we haven't gotten to address yet, though, is how do I know if my system is broken? Because most salespeople are starting from, and I know you'd agree with me here, no system whatsoever. I've been into companies, Nick, where they just give you a sheet of leads and they say, get to work.
Yep.
Not what questions are you supposed to ask? How do you qualify them? Or who do I pass them on to once I sell something? Or what is it that I'm selling exactly? It's not clear to me either. So salespeople are just kind of dropped into the water. And if you swim, you swim. And if you sink, then like you say, you gracefully exit. So I would love to talk about the building a system here for how do we actually fix a broken system. And so before we hop into our actual process for system building, because you could build a system to fix a system just as easily as you can build a system. How do you know if a system is broken, Nick? I mean, this is something that's crazy, right? I have a system. I've got a 5-step process or a 12-step, chain of steps I'm putting through, somebody. Are you a franchisee? Which model is best for you? How many stores, budget, location, all that. You can build a system. How do you know if it's broken?
Yeah, so that took me actually quite a while to figure out the answer to that. But I think over the last few years, maybe 3, I've really nailed that down. And the way that I figured out how to nail it down is analytics. So everything has to be measurable through numbers and through process. And if you have your analytics down, your goals set, whatever those may be, and second is you have a sales process that's, again, prescriptive, and you can step by step, whatever those steps are, you can look at each step and say, okay, where is it breaking down? Because oftentimes you'll find a bottleneck somewhere. If you have a 6-step process in your sales process, and step 3 is consistently where a candidate is dropping out or a salesperson is not getting people across to the next step, there's probably something wrong with step 3. And it's probably time to take a deeper dive into seeing what the problem is. And oftentimes it's probably something within that step 3 that's going to help. And maybe it's a few steps within that process, but that's how I found is the analytics around it, measuring it week by week, month by month, and really seeing the detail around it is going to help you be able to determine where the bottleneck is.
Where the bottleneck is. So if we're looking at systems like this is something that a lot of salespeople and a lot of systems thinkers in general, they don't take the time to do when they're developing a system, which is that each step of that system is supposed to accomplish something. At a philosophical level, it's removing hope. Now I know what to do instead of having to guess. But at a more tactical level, it's supposed to make me more efficient. because of the system itself. So instead of having to pick up the phone and dial into a directory and try to figure out whose number I'm supposed to be calling and where they're at, I can just Google them. That's the system, right?
Yep.
So if we don't define how each step of a system is supposed to make us more efficient, supposed to move a lead closer to becoming a customer, then we need to go back and do that, because otherwise we're not going to have anything to measure against. And this is something that I find so often in the sales teams that I coach, Nick. We get brought in there, Sean, help us figure out why we didn't make, number. All right, well, what was your number you're supposed to make? We just told our folks to sell more.
That's hope.
I guess they did. They're 0.001% better than they were from the last timetable we're looking at, but not as much as you wanted them to be. But they did sell more. So technically they all won, right? Well, no, not from a business owner's perspective. So let's take a look at building, how do you fix a broken system as a system? This is going to be a lot of fun. So when we talk about building systems here at Bulletproof Selling, we talk about trimming that hope away from our sales strategies. And when we talk about trimming, we use that acronym TRIM, T-R-I-M. This is a basic system build, okay? So T is trigger. How do I know that I'm supposed to pull a system out of the stack? Because let's say that I'm really operationally efficient and I've got a lot of systems, sales, marketing, finance, a lot of systems floating through my business. And as a franchisor or franchisee, you got systems, man. That's how you're successful. Well, how do I know to pull a system out? What's the trigger that lets me know I need to take a closer look at that?
Yes, I think it depends what you're looking at, but no matter what business you're in and what sales game you're in, there's always the first thing you have to look at: leads. Where are your leads coming from? So I use that as the example today because I think it's a good one. So not all leads are created equally. In my business, it's looking where the source is. We've got, in the franchising world, we get sourced candidates from about 10 different sources, give or take. And if I look at 50 leads and 50 leads from 2 different brands, and I look at, well, where, and let's say of the 50 on both brands, we had, 10 of them go through the process and only 2 of them through the other, just making up numbers. But
yeah,
it'd say, okay, is it the salesperson that's not doing their job? Or if you look at the lead sources, which ones have better quality individuals that we're supposed to be working with as candidates or better leads? And so it's really dissecting that to the core so that you can figure out, okay, well, we were spending this much money over here, but maybe that lead source isn't as good. Maybe we pivot and make that a better source, or we're not getting as many leads from here. So maybe we are spending the money with them, but we need to contact them and say, hey, you guys are our best lead source and we're not getting them from you. We need to increase that. So there's the leads part of it. And then there's the conversion of those leads into, whatever the next step is, right? Whether it's getting on one of the salesperson's calendars, seeing them in person, whatever the business may be. And then you can just dissect it from there. If it's that step where you're getting an appointment, but they're not converting, is it a sales process or person issue where they're not doing their job to pitch it right or whatever it may be? So it's really looking at each step and then again, dissecting it to where potential bottleneck is or problem is based on the steps in the sales process.
Love it. So we've covered the first thing I mentioned that you heard is absolutely critical, which is, hey, are your salespeople following the process?
Yeah.
There may be a bottleneck, but if the people aren't following the process you've given them, then that's something that we can coach on rather than trying to, rework an entire system around. Because some changes in a system are small, as you know, and some of them, like revamping an entire pipeline, that might require a little more heavy lifting. So I want to make sure before I start lifting big rocks that this is a project that actually needs to be done, or is it something that I can just coach my salespeople around because they're missing some steps in the process that's been laid out. And the second thing you mentioned was actually making this thing a repeatable program. So let's take a look at that, because that's actually the R in TRIM, which is repeatable. So what's my 3 to 5 step process for breaking a system apart to see where does it need to be improved? Something that I could apply to systems in sales and marketing and lead generation. And feel free, if you want to pull an example and we can stick with leads, processing them through, finding them, making sure that they're quality. But how do I make my system fixing a repeatable process?
Yeah. So I'll use my CycleBar business as an example. We look at leads in, appointments, scheduled actual appointments. From there, it's the actual enrollment and then referrals. And every step of the way, we look at, well, okay, if we had example, we want to get somewhere between 250 and 400 leads a month in each one of our studios. So if we know that number, that's the first step. Then it's like, okay, we also know that about 40% of our business should come from referrals. About 30 or so percent should come from digital marketing, and then the other third's organic in community events, give or take. So that's kind of the 100%. And if you break down the leads and then the appointments, we have this 5-step process. So then it's like, okay, did we get enough leads? Number one, check, we did that. Let's say we got 300 leads, great. Appointments, we know the conversion into appointments should be about 20%, right? And then from there, it's how many people actually showed up. Well, we know our show rate's about 95%. Once we get them booked, they're most likely showing up. And then we know from there, it's the enrollment, membership based, how many of them should convert. We also know a good number to hit is somewhere between 40 and 60% conversion to once they're actually on a bike and they want to potentially sign up. And then the final is referrals. How many referrals off that new candidate or new member, should we actually get based on that? And we know that for every member that comes in, if we're doing our job to ask for that referral, we should get between 1 and 3 additional referrals to their friends or family that should come in. So it's just breaking down that process again, but we can measure out every one of those steps. And
I love that. And that making it repeatable then is laying out your system end to end, break it out into its steps, because a lot of us are trying to run systems from our heads. I find that to be the most inefficient way to run a system. I need a sales process in a cadence or a campaign. I need to see a pipeline in a CRM, all the things that allow me to just take a look at this so I don't have to try to remember all the disparate steps. So if I lay my system out, and I know that from this point, from point A to point B, I'm supposed to have this type of result or this many numbers of conversion or whatever the goal of that system is. And from B to C, this number, and from C to D, so on and so forth, all the way down to the end of the system. Then you can take a look backward from the goal, like, the goal of your system at CycleBar. We're going to convert more people into becoming customers or members, right? So I can look at my total goal, what's my goal for the month, and then walk it backward through my sales process and find out what part of that conversion is bottlenecked, what part of it is broken, and how do I fix it. And so the I in trim, what we're going to hop into next, is making this thing improvable. So just because I know what to fix doesn't fix the problem, does it? I actually have to get in there and do some heavy lifting. So how do you make sure that you and your folks are accountable to actually fixing what you see as the issue inside of a system?
Yeah, so I'd say that the number one priority for us on that and how we actually fix the problem when we see it is determining who the problem is at that point in time. Is it a poor training problem? Is it a poor GM problem? Or is it a poor, I like to say, the weakest link problem? And the weakest link is the front desk individuals, because you're only as good as your weakest link in any sales process. So
I love that. Yeah.
It's pinpointing that first. And let's say, for example, it is the GM. GM's not converting at a high level. Okay, so maybe we need to do some role playing, some coaching there, and help them get better. And then see 30 days from now, are they getting better? And what we do in that process is, if we're seeing lack of results, because we do a pretty good job of vetting these individuals up front, and they should know what they're doing when they get into that role. But if they're not, we put them on a 30-day notice on, hey, just to give you a heads up, we're putting you on 30-day notice, not to scare you, but really to get you back on track, because we're not seeing the results that we should see out of a position that you hold. And I think a lot of times management and or business owners are afraid to have that metric in place. But the example I use is, if you're an accountant and he wasn't filling out his spreadsheets or doing his job with P&Ls, you'd likely come at him right away and say, hey, this was due on the 14th for this P&L, and I don't have it. Why is it any different for a salesperson? It shouldn't be, right? They got to hit their metrics just like everybody else, and they got to hit their goals. So we put that in place. It seems to work pretty well. And you know what? I can tell you this. I've had stories where people, again, exit gracefully after that point, because it comes out that they might talk a good talk, but there's no action or little action. And I've had other people where they were like, wow, I'm so glad you did that when you did it, because I didn't feel like I was getting anywhere, or I wasn't getting enough results, and I could not pinpoint why. And the coach really helped me get there. So I think those are some of the things we see that help.
That's amazing. So we've got the trigger, making it repeatable, making it improvable. And now the final piece, which, we circle all the way back to the beginning here, is how do I measure the results of my success? So I've taken a system, I've changed some components out, I've tweaked it a bit, And that might involve just, replacing parts of it, replacing steps, or replacing personnel, to your point. Now, how do I measure the success of this to know, is this system getting me better results than the old one I had?
Yep. So whether it's selling a franchise or awarding a franchise or selling a membership, it all comes down to the same thing: conversion, right? What's that conversion percentage you're looking for from the lead coming in to the lead getting across the finish line or not? And whatever those metrics are in your industry or in your company, it's really seeing, number one, are you hitting where your benchmark should be? And two, wherever it was, let's say it was at 20% conversion, and now you've gotten it to 30%, well, you know something's working in the right way because you've improved it. If it stays stagnant when you went to and figure out that coaching, something's still not working, and you probably got to continue to look for the answers. But that's how we look at it. We measure it all based on conversion.
Yep. And then to track what you're doing to make those changes so you know whether that was the right step or not, instead of just let's revamp the entire thing and then see if it's any better. Well, if you make 40 changes, it could be any one of those 40 or a combination of them. So I find it much better to tweak things small if you can. So that way, was that successful? Did we motivate the person the right way? Or did we have to, hire 20 new people and then got better results? Well, maybe we could have done that a lot cheaper. That's because human capital probably being the most expensive thing that any business has. So, Nick, this is a pleasure, man, because we got to break a system and then put it back together again. That's something we don't get to do very often. For people that are interested in getting deeper into your world, into what you do, into Rep Group, how do we get more into that, man? I know you're active on LinkedIn, but where do people find you? How do they get in touch?
Yeah, so you can email me. First off, give you the email. It's Nick or N for Nick, Sheehan, SHEEHAN at repumgroup.com, and you can get in touch with us anywhere there. And then the repumgroup.com is actually our website as well, and you can check out all of our brands that are on there and reach out to us there if you'd like. We have a Instagram page, Facebook page as well. Just look up REPM Group in the search and you'll find us, and you can reach out to us anytime.
Outstanding, sir. Well, thanks for that. And I'll make sure that stuff's in the show notes if people can link to you directly. For us here at Bulletproof Selling, make sure that you're following us as well on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, where we house all of these live stream interviews. And of course, the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere the podcast can be found. For more sales systems to help you replace hope with certainty, just like the one we were able to build with Nick today, make sure you're checking out bulletproof-selling.com, where new stuff is being released every day of the week to help you replace hope with certainty. Well, Sean Rhodes here. It's been a pleasure serving the sales community alongside you. Let's get out there and make selling bulletproof.
Thanks, Sean.